There is a moment on a train platform when the train is late and the phone is in the pocket and the hands don't reach for it. It lasts maybe 4 seconds. Then something happens, a small internal shifting, the way a person's weight moves from one foot to the other, and the phone comes out. That 4-second window, that is what this is about. Not the phone, not the distraction. The moment just before, the one that felt briefly like it had no floor. There is an old word for that feeling. It has been called a nuisance, a weakness, a condition to be treated. It has also been called by at least one philosopher writing in a cold room in Paris, the central problem of human life. The word is boredom, and what it was actually for is something most of us never had to ask because we were too busy making it go away. Here is the contradiction. We have, for most of recorded history, treated boredom as a failure of will, of discipline, of imagination. The restless mind was the undisciplined mind. The person who could not sit still was the person who had not yet learned to be serious. Monks were given hours of silence not as punishment but as practice, the assumption being that the mind, left alone long enough, would eventually stop thrashing and begin to work. The same assumption ran through the old grammar schools, the long sea voyages, the hours of waiting that simply had to be waited through. Boredom in that world was not a problem to be solved. It was a condition to be endured until it became something else. And yet the same tradition, the same centuries of monks and scholars and letter writers, also produced an enormous body of work aimed at filling time. Games, festivals, the elaborate rituals of the liturgical calendar, even the strictest monastic rule built-in feast days. Nobody actually wanted to be bored. The desire to escape it is not modern. It is not a failure of our particular era. It is as old as the cave and the fire and the long night with nothing to do but wait for morning. So the tension is not between a past that embraced boredom and a present that refuses it. The tension is inside the experience itself. Boredom has always been both the thing that produces and the thing that repels. The mind wants to escape it. The mind also, it turns out, needs it. And for most of human history, escape was hard enough that the need got met whether the mind consented or not. That is what has changed, not the desire to escape. Blaise Pascal was 39 years old when he died, and he left behind, among other things, a box. Not a metaphorical box, a physical one, a wooden case, found after his death in 1662, stuffed with scraps of paper. Some were whole sheets. Some were fragments torn and pinned together in clusters. Some were single lines written in a hurry, as if the thought had arrived faster than the pen could follow. His sister and nephew spent years trying to arrange them into something coherent. They never entirely succeeded. What they had was the residue of a mind that had been left alone with itself for a long time. One of those fragments, numbered 139 in one of the standard editions, reads in French something close to this: that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. He was not, when he wrote it, a man at peace with quiet rooms. He had been one of the most restlessly productive minds in Europe. Calculating machines, probability theory, hydraulic presses, religious controversy. He had spent his 20s in Paris salons, in argument, in company. And then, in his final years, illness narrowed his world to something close to that room he described. He could not always read, he could not always write. He sat. What he found there apparently was not peace. The fragments suggest a man in argument with himself, about God, about distraction, about the misery of consciousness without occupation. The box was not the work of a man who had learned to sit quietly. It was the work of a man who had been forced to, and who could not stop writing down what the silence showed him. That is the thing the box suggests. Pascal did not sit quietly in a room and find tranquility. He sat quietly in a room and found material. The boredom, the confinement, the enforced stillness, it did not empty him. It pressed something out of him that the salons and the arguments and the calculating machines had not. The fragments were not his best work by his own standard. They were unfinished, provisional, sometimes contradictory, but they are the work that has lasted. 3.5 centuries later, people still copy out that single line about the room, not because Pascal resolved the problem, because he sat still long enough to see it clearly. Pascal's box is not an unusual story once you start looking. It is the shape that a great deal of thinking has taken, not the thinking done in the bright hours of productivity and argument, but the thinking that happened when everything else was taken away. The illness, the confinement, the crossing that took 3 weeks with nothing to read, the winter that kept a person indoors, what looks from outside like lost time, what turned out from inside to be the time when something settled long enough to be seen. Walter Benjamin, writing in 1936, called boredom the dream bird that hatches the egg of experience. He meant something precise by it, that the stories we carry, the impressions we accumulate, require a particular kind of inattention to ripen, not concentration, not effort, the relaxed, receptive state that comes only when the mind has run out of things to do and stops finally managing itself. The tension beat two named, that boredom is both what produces and what repels, does not resolve here. It just becomes more legible. The mind that needed escape and the mind that needed stillness were never two different minds. They were the same mind at different points in the same process. The escape was real. The need was also real, and for most of human history, the escape was hard enough and the need was met. What the box suggests, what Benjamin's image suggests, is not that boredom is secretly pleasant, or that we were wrong to want relief from it. It is something smaller and more uncomfortable than that. It is that the discomfort may have been the mechanism, that the thing we were trying to get away from was, in some cases, the thing doing the work, not in spite of the restlessness, because of it. The mind thrashing against the silence was the mind beginning, without knowing it, to sort. That is not a comfortable thought to sit with. The train is still late. Somewhere in that wooden box, among the torn scraps and the pinned clusters and the lines written faster than the pen wanted to go, Pascal left a fragment that was never finished. Not the famous one of the others, a sentence that breaks off mid-thought, as if he heard something in the next room and set down the pen and never came back to it. The editors marked it incomplete. They were right. It was incomplete. He had run out of time before the silence had finished with him. The phone is in the pocket. The hands know where it is. The 4 seconds are running.